All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Eileen Johnson, who's going to lead us on operations, domain 4.
Okay, but first of all, we've got a question from Christy. It's on the screen there. Insight regarding the number of questions versus scenarios. There are from, now I took the previous version of the CAE exam, so it might have changed. Terry also took the previous version of it. But there were more recall questions versus scenario questions. Don't know if that has changed. You might reach out to your friends who took the CAE exam most recently, and there was a group that did and passed, and check with them in terms of whether they thought that there were more scenario exam questions versus sort of the ones where it's just this is the question, answer it. Any other questions, general questions before we get started on operations? Okay. How did you all find the readings this week? Were they overwhelming, manageable? Sigh, it's too much work. You'll get through it. Don't worry about it. And if you don't do it all in 1 week, you always have the next week to catch up, right?
Okay. How's everybody feeling? We're about halfway through. How y'all feeling? Wow, silence. Okay. Don, oh, there you go. Hi, Don.
Yeah.
Feeling good?
Yeah, just running a little late this morning.
Right. Everybody's not feeling too stressed?
I'm definitely a little stressed. I mean, I'll admit it. That, especially this domain was a lot and covered quite a bit. I mean, I see how significant it is, but you know, I'm feeling better than I did the first one, which was like a great bar to set, to be honest, because I was real stressed. And now I'm feeling a little better now that I know what to expect every week.
Anybody else? Sharing Melissa's feelings? Different?
Well, I think breaking down the questions has helped me more than anything I've done yet, to be honest.
Good. Good to hear. Okay.
And they might have, I've heard this before from folks, but read the question, read the answers, and then go back and read the question again. Because as you read the question, you might kind of think what the answer would be, and then you read the questions, and it might be, there's always 1 or 2 you can throw out and 2 that are extremely close. So if you go back and read that question again, that helps you really to focus on what the answers are. And I found it in previous classes that I've taught like this, when people do that, they get a better number of answers right when they're doing their self-study.
And we've talked a lot for the first 3 domains about breaking down the questions and really focus on what is the question asking, and generally trying to keep answers more high level than go tactical. And so even in these tougher sections, or like Eileen was saying, maybe a certain area is not your forte, just if you keep using that, as Don said, just keep using that tool of practice of how you break down questions, that will help you a lot, even if it's not necessarily your best area of expertise. And you're probably going to get it down to 2 pretty quickly. And that's a lot of the struggle right there. It's just getting rid of the ones that clearly are not right, and then having a decent shot with the ones that remain. So keep using those skills. That will help you a lot.
Mm-hmm. And remember, you're the chief staff executive and you have an unlimited budget, which is
Like we all do.
which sometimes trips people up, because they're like, well, no, I know we don't have the money to do that answer. That's wrong. But no, there's no budget. You're unlimited.
All right. Well, there's no other questions. Wait, okay. Whitney, thank you for sharing. PPAM and the law book.
And the law book. Okay, those are good resources.
I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and put up the questions for this domain.
Great. Thank you, Terry.
All right. Let's get to the questions.
There's a lot of content in this one, isn't there?
Getting there. Oh, there we go.
Question 1, have you been doing it that someone reads the question?
Yep.
Okay. Volunteers for number 1?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Your association has recently begun accepting member dues payments, conference registrations, and payments for training manuals for continuing education materials. How do you develop and establish policies and procedures to ensure strong internal financial controls to prevent financial/accounting irregularities and inappropriate funds accounting? Wow. So that's a big one. That's a big question there. So it looks like to me, the main juxt of the question are payments, policies and controls. I mean, those are the things I'm looking at in this question, right? So the answers are: work with your accountant to develop financial policies and procedures manual. B, establish a tracking system for all money received by the association from members. C, based on written policies and generally accepted accounting procedures, assign staff roles for handling financial activities. And D, work with your accountant and your board of directors to develop and establish policies that meet the specific need of your association. So A just seems like something that would be happening in a vacuum. So I'm going to knock that one out. Let's see, B. So this is not developing policies here, because it says develop policies and procedures. So B is establish a tracking system for all money received by the association from members. So I'm going to knock B out. Based on written policies and generally accepted accounting procedures, assign staff roles for handling financial activities. Yeah, looks good. Work with your accountant and your board of directors to develop and establish policies that meet the specific needs of your association. So for me, D doesn't meet the mark totally. It kind of does, but C seems to meet the mark to me. So I'm going with C.
Anyone else? C is in fact the correct answer. So yeah, you got that one right. When you look at D seems like a viable choice. You're going to work with your accountant and your board to establish policies, but the question asks you for policies and procedures. And D doesn't go all the way, as Dom was saying, it doesn't get you to the procedures part of it. So did anyone get that wrong and needs to think that through?
This is Christy. I actually would have gotten that wrong because of the question of how do you develop and establish policies?
Exactly.
C to me infers that policies are already established. And so I was a toss between A and D. And the reason I would have discarded D is I don't think the CSE would necessarily work directly with the board of directors. They would work with the CEO, who would work with the board of directors. But
The CSE is the CEO. They call it
I thought we
CSE.
had clarity that the CEO was different than the CSE in most of these responsibilities, because the CEO's responsibility was to partner with the board chair.
So they said that for this, the CEO is like the chairman of the executive board, not the chairman, not the chief executive officer or something like that, right?
Yes, it's very confusing. ASAE calls what you would call the executive director, CEO, they call that the chief staff executive, the CSE.
Okay, thank you.
Right. I mean, ideally, I think it's a good observation. Neither C nor D are really good answers because it's missing that part about developing and establishing policies and procedures. So if the answer combined C and D, that would be a good response. But sometimes you don't get a perfect response, and you got to, pick the one that seems to be the best one in terms of answering the question. Move on to number 2.
I'll do that one.
Okay.
What must be maintained and filed for an association incorporated in one state and having offices in another state? Separate 990 forms for each location. Corporate annual report only in the state of domicile. Corporate annual report in both the state of incorporation and the state of its offices. Documents for incorporation in each state where the association has an office. Whew. I think a 990 for each location wouldn't be right because there's one organization and it's on a national level. I'm kind of drawn to D, documents for incorporation in each state where the association has an office, because they might be subtly different state by state. And I went with D.
Did anybody get a different answer? The correct answer is actually C. You file an annual report in the state of your incorporation and the state where the other offices are. The difference, Catherine, why D is not correct is you can only incorporate in one state. Then in other states, you register as a foreign corporation. So it's not incorporation, it's registration. But when you are incorporated in one state and doing business in another state, you would file in both of those states. And in some cases, a national organization might have offices in multiple states. I've got one that's right now in 21 states. So
Wow.
they file in DC, their home of corporation, and then all the other states as well.
Okay.
For those of you that might be a C3 with fundraising, A might look like a good choice, because if you are a C3 and do fundraising, you would have to submit your 990 in those states where you are required to register to solicit funds from members and others. So sometimes people get tripped up on that one, thinking, well, of course we file 990s in the states where we fundraise. Any questions about this? Is one where you have to kind of just know the answer. There's not a whole lot of analysis to do. It's just, what's the correct answer? Any questions on that one? Okay, move on to 3. Any volunteers for 3?
I'm happy to try that one. What would an association want to avoid in its contract with a vendor for an association-sponsored affinity program? A, termination features. B, mutual indemnifications. C, license of the intellectual property of the association. D, a clause on the association licensing, administrative, and marketing activities. I went back and I had chosen D there, based on what I thought the answer was.
And you're correct. These are the right answer, because
Great.
A, B, and C are all elements of a license. So you'd want to have those in every license that you do. D, and the reason why D is incorrect is you're trying to have your affinity program revenue not be taxable. And if the contract includes a clause that requires your association to be marketing the program to your members and all that, you kind of fall into that very gray area where you might be actually actively promoting the sponsored affinity program, and that could convert what is passive non-taxed revenue to taxable revenue. And again, this is one where you just have to know what the answer is. There's not a whole lot of analysis involved. Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay. Number 4. Any volunteers?
I'll take that one, if you can hear me okay. Which of the following forms of income incurs unrelated business income tax liability? And I thought this was another one you just really had to know, which I did not get it correct when I quizzed myself, but it is D, rental income.
Mm-hmm. And this is one where, that's correct, C, but this is one where it's actually not the best question, maybe, in terms of how it's worded, because passive rental income is not subject to UBIT. It's active rental income that is. So they're really dumbing down a complicated tax question. So if you are just receive rental income and you're not providing any services to your tenants, then it's passive, it's not taxable. But say you sublet to another association and you provide, receptionist or financial support to them, or you provide any other services, that's when it becomes taxable. Any questions on that one? If not, okay, number 5.
To number 5. Which of the following could cause liability during the interview process? I think this one is another kind of a factual, kind of straight on answer. So D, naturally, asking about candidates' abilities related to their medical conditions could be considered illegal or liability related during the interview process. I think all of the others are definitely okay to do during the interview process as it relates to the job.
Did you say D for dog or B for boy?
D, I'm sorry, D, asking about the abilities related to medical conditions.
You would think that's the answer, but it's wrong. The
No
answer is
way.
B.
Oh.
The answer is B.
I,
You cannot require a medical exam prior to making a job offer. Now, the reason why, okay, the other ones, obviously you're going to check references, you're going to ask them about
Yeah.
their skills. You can, if it's, require a typing test, you want them to show how they can do an Excel spreadsheet, you're fine to do that. The reason why you can ask about medical conditions is under the American with Disabilities Act. If somebody has a medical condition that would require them to have an accommodation, you're allowed to determine if it's a reasonable accommodation that's required. And reasonable is there's a number of factors they consider, but one of them is sort of like the size of the employer, the number of employees, whether there's redundancy in terms of other people doing a job who can provide support. If you have trying to hire someone as an accountant where it's very much, looking at spreadsheets and doing numbers and they're blind, maybe that's not the best matchup in terms of skills. So you are allowed to ask about what sort of accommodation an individual would need in order to do the job. This also comes up in religious accommodation issues. For example, if someone is Muslim and needs to be taking their prayer breaks throughout the day, I read an article last week that with daylight savings time, they could require 3 breaks during the day for prayers. And whether that would be something that an employer can accommodate depends on a number of factors, but size is often one of those questions. Any questions on that one?
I missed that. Oh.
That's okay. That's why we're here, right? Okay. Number 6. Oh, we're going sideways.
Did everybody go once? Is it my turn again?
Okay, I'm gonna reset the share screen. I have no idea. Wait, that's part of the test now. You have to answer them sideways. Is that a problem, folks? Just keeping you alert, seeing paying attention. Let's go. Give me a minute here.
It's okay if y'all have your video turned off. You actually get better reception that way often, depending on where you are.
All right.
We got some chat questions. Oh, technical questions. Yeah, this section throws everything at you. You've got employment law, you got contracts, you got IP licensing. It is a bit much. Don, if you have the book and want to go on to number 6.
Sure, I'll go ahead. What should a CSE consider before disciplining or discharging an employee because he/she is an alcoholic or a drug user? Well, that's right there just seems illegal to me because that's a disease, right? It needs to be treated. But anyway, let's go. The action is potentially illegal. The action is the right of the employer. It is important to take this action to maintain staff morale. It is essential to review if there's a clause addressing the action employee contract. I'm going with A because it just seems illegal to me.
You're right, but it doesn't mean if you have an employee who is an alcoholic or a drug user, that you can't ever discipline them or terminate them. You know, if they show up to work drunk or obviously somebody shows up working their high and they can't focus, they're just like incoherent in meetings, those are all reasons to discharge them. But you do have to consider it and talk with your HR specialist and lawyer before you do any sort of discharge. Okay. Number 7. Anyone hasn't taken one yet? Even if your video is off, you can still talk. I feel like a primary school teacher. I'm going to start calling on people.
That's okay. This is Christy. I'll do this one, although I may not know the answer. Which is considered a best practice inspired by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act? Boards should restructure and downsize to be more efficient and accountable for oversight. The top executive compensation review process should be reviewed by the board on an annual basis. The board management relationship should be studied periodically to ensure the independence of the board from management. Audited financial statements should be subject to certification of the CSE and CFO and must be made available annually to all members. I think it's B, but I could be wrong.
B is a good guess. I think D would have been a good guess too. The answer is actually C. That the board management relationship should be studied periodically. It's funny because in talking with folks about Sarbanes-Oxley, the things that I usually focus on are that all corporations are required to have a document retention and destruction policy. And you're required to have a whistleblower policy. Those are the 2 biggies that usually impact associations. The chances of this being on the test are probably really slim though. So
Can I ask a question about that one? I had
Sure,
chosen D because the book did say that the audited financial statement should be subject to certification of the CSE and CFO. But do we think that D wasn't the answer because it has the secondary part, which it must be made available to all members?
correct, yeah. And
Awesome.
whatever state you're incorporated in, there's usually something in the statute about what rights members have to review documents. But there's no requirement that you affirmatively make your financial statements available to your members. If they request them, you have to provide them, but you don't have to distribute it to everybody or post it on your website.
That one was tricky.
Mhm. There's a lot of tricky questions, unfortunately. Okay, number 8.
I'll do 8. Okay, as the new CSE and an association with a strategic plan that calls for major technology 3B2 improvements, what would be the first step in assessing your information management system? Oh boy. Okay, form a team of managers to look at the needs, hire information to reach your cross-sectional. I went with A because I felt like getting a report back from the managers to sort of track what they might need, and then you would bring in the consultant to help them do the work. But seeing as I'm already 0 for 1.
Now you're 0 for 2. The answer
I'm 0
is
for
C.
2. All right, consistent. Okay, so
Form a cross-departmental team of people who perform the detailed work of assessing the needs. So you start with your users, work with your users to identify what they actually need to get the work done. And then you build up from there to involve your IT department and your consultants and your managers.
okay, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, a lot of these, as you think through them, it's like, oh yeah, that's the way we did it. Or that's the way we should have done it because we had a mistake and didn't do it that way. Okay, number 9. On investment policies. Any takers?
I'll do that. The board of directors wants to establish an investment policy. What are the main components of a prudent and systematic investment program? A, analysis of stocks and bonds. B, factors that influence borrowing, lending decisions. C, asset allocation, risk tolerance, and measurement of performance. Or D, statement of purpose, statement of objectives, and currency denomination. Finance is not my strong suit, so I'm just going to say that first. Prudent systematic investment program. So if we're talking about investments, I would rule out D
Mhm.
and B.
That's
Because
good.
they don't have anything to do with investments. I would say A, analysis of stocks and bonds.
Okay, so the correct answer is C. So your asset allocation, if you haven't gotten that far in the readings yet, asset allocation is how you divide your investment between stocks and bonds. Your risk tolerance is important because that determines which things you invest in. You could be investing in, if you just say, well, I'm going to invest in stocks, there are some stocks that are very aggressive, that very risky, that maybe you don't want to invest in, or there's some that are very staid and conservative that won't generate a lot of return to you. So somewhere on that continuum is the appropriate risk tolerance for your association. And then your measurement of performance would be how do you are receiving information about how your investment portfolio is doing over time. Any questions on that one? Again, this is when you just have to know the content. So, and then we started at the beginning of this for those who hadn't joined at that time. If there's areas that you just don't know a whole lot of because it's not something you've personally had experience with, those are the areas that you should be focusing on. And if you find as you're going through practice exams, in the back of the book that you are missing certain areas, you can go back and reread those, or just in the study guide itself, there's that sort of synopsis for all the questions in each chapter that kind of gives you the highlights. And I would focus on that because you can't know everything, but just focus on those things that you can to help prepare yourself for the exam.
And I was just going to add to this again, while you do need to sort of know this one, you can also look at the question that talks about main components of the program. So when you look at the word components, that would kind of lead you at least to start out with, I think, C and D as possibly, because those are components. A and B are really not components. And then D would probably rule out because it talks about currency denomination, which isn't going to apply to that many organizations. So again, just as you try to think about, shortening up the choices, those are again some of the things that, in addition to trying to, some of these just know the answer, it does help too if you get stuck in the test. Just keep going back to that question: what is it they're actually asking for?
Good advice, Terry. Thanks. Number 10.
I'll do number 10. You are tasked with reporting the finances of the association to the board. What must be included in an accurate and complete budget? A capital budget, cash budget, expense budget, cash budget, revenue budget, operating strategic cash, or operating capital cash. I went with D because in the other answers, you wouldn't have an expense budget or a revenue budget or a strategic budget. Those would fall within your operating budget and your cash budget. So I went with D.
And that's the right answer. Thank you. Okay. And thanks for the explanation. That's very helpful for folks. Number 11. Preferred time to conduct performance appraisals. Okay. Anybody not taken one yet? Rachel?
Hi, I'm here, but I can't see the screen, so I'm just listening today. I'm
Oh,
having technical issues.
Okay, do you have the handbook?
I don't with me now. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's
I'm
fine.
sort of
Okay, just
useless
listen.
today. I'm
That's
attending,
fine.
but just useless.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
I'll take this one.
Okay, thanks.
When is the preferred time to conduct performance appraisals? After the close of fiscal year, every 6 months from the date of hire, every 12 months from the date of hire, a month before the close of the fiscal year. So this one, quickly, I went into my bad habit of, well, we do what our association is. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, best practice. The best practice is after the close of the fiscal year, which is the answer, and not every 12 months, which was the answer I was actually going for.
And do you know why A is the right answer?
No.
Okay, so if anyone has a revenue target as part of their goals for the year, you won't have that information until after the close of the fiscal year. Okay. Number 12. Volunteers for 12.
I'll do it. How would a CSE determine the rate range within a, how would a CSE determine the rate range within a particular salary grade? Wow. I'm gonna say I guess I'm guessing at this. I'm thinking C. And C is establish the maximum rate of the grade 25% above the midpoint reported in a compensation survey. I mean, I can tell you how we do it, but this is, I don't know.
You know, a lot of compensation consultants do it that way, which is probably why you chose C. According to ASE, the correct answer is A. Determine the market rate of the position and set that as the midpoint of the range.
Can I ask of the group if anybody has where to find that in the PPMs or wherever they looked? I would really.
Exactly. That was my question. Where is it in the
I
reading?
couldn't find it.
find it. Yeah.
I'm sure it's there. I was, like I said in my email, my eyes were a little bloodshot after this week. So I might have just skimmed over it, but.
Tell you what, we'll look up that answer and get it to y'all.
Thank you.
Because actually, I think that's, I mean, sometimes these answers, I just don't think they're the right answers. And the good part about the exam is that if a lot of folks miss a question, the reviewers will throw that one out, but not a whole lot of questions though. But number 12 is something where, you know, you'd look at, you do a compensation survey to establish the market rate. So that is a little confusing. So we can look that one up. Source document. Okay. Number 13.
I don't mind trying to take that one. How is a benchmark position used in a salary survey? A, internally to test the appropriateness of the salary range. B, internally to test the validity of the relative value of salary levels. C, externally to test the comparative relationship to the marketplace of similar titles. Or D, externally to test the competitive relationship of salaries of specific positions in the marketplace. To me, it was internally versus externally in this, just to rule out. And for me, I went with externally. And benchmark position, I just sort of looking at what it is and the root of it is I chose C just because it's the similar titles. It's a, that's what benchmarking salaries are. It's a comparative salary across the board. I thought the titles would be the same.
So you chose D, dog?
No, I chose C.
Okay, the answer is actually D.
Oh, I should have chosen D, is what you're saying. Okay.
Right, yes. And I think that the key words here, as Terry said, focus on what you can. Your question is, how is a benchmark position used? And then D has specific positions in the marketplace. So you're benchmarking specific positions in your salary survey. Any questions on that one? Okay, 14. Outsourcing strategies. Anybody want to take this one?
I'll take it. Which of the following is the first step in implementing an outsourcing strategy? A, determine if staff has the capability to handle the work. Determining if outsourcing can help your association be successful. C, determining if the association's policies and procedures allow outsourcing. D, determining if the financial situation and budget allow funds for the project. So we always know that budget answer is never the answer. So I crossed out D. Let's see. First step. I would imagine if we're talking about outsourcing that we've already determined that the staff cannot handle the work. I went with B. I wasn't sure why C wasn't the correct answer, but I felt like D or B as in boy was the best answer for this one.
Right, and that's the correct answer. And I think with A, you wouldn't, so it's the first step. So you've not determined whether or not your staff can handle the work, because sometimes your staff can handle the work, but you want to have an outside opinion for some reason. Maybe because your board doesn't believe the staff. I know all the time I was in-house, I hated having to pay someone else to tell the board exactly what I told them, but they believed it when someone else said it.
Oh, often, yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So it could be a situation like that, or it could be that your staff could do the work, but could a consultant, outside outsourcing it, do it better, more efficiently, more effectively. It's something that your staff would have to learn how to do, where somebody else already knows how to do. So that's why B is the correct answer. Okay. Number 15. Do a time check here. We need to keep moving through. There's a lot of questions in this chapter. Melissa, do you want to take 15?
Sure. Which of the following describes the exchange of information among the association's members on the credit standings of customers of those members? Clearly illegal, governed by state laws. C, a violation of privacy laws. D, legal in principle by action of the U.S. Supreme Court. Keywords were exchange of information among the association's member and credit standings. It's not. I kind of went back to, I couldn't choose between A and C, to be honest. Am I warm, at least?
Between A and C? No.
No?
Yeah, it's D. You just have to
Then
know
I was
it.
gonna say, then it has to be opposite. It has to be D.
Yeah, this one is, you just have to know the answer, and
I
you can still
clearly did
pass
not
those and you get
today.
a couple wrong. Yeah. And we have a possible solution to number 12. A rationale, thank you. We can check that up later. 16. We're on all the questions, antitrust questions now. Anybody want to tackle 16?
I'll try, I guess.
Okay, the answer to 15 was D. So Whitney had a question. So go ahead, sorry, 16.
Which of the following statements is correct when it comes to an association's legal obligations regarding statistical surveys and non-members? Comes to an association's legal obligations regarding surveys and non-members. There is no need to provide survey results to non-members. Survey results must be made available to non-members at the same rate schedule. Survey results that impact competitive advantage can be exclusive member benefit. These surveys may be denied. So C seems really strong and A seems really strong to me. I think I'm going to go with A.
With A?
I'm probably wrong.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
And again, this is one you just have to know. The answer is D. If you made participation in the survey available to a non-member and they chose not to participate, you don't have to make the results available to them. The other questions, responses, and again, these are antitrust issues. So A, you have to make the survey available to non-members. You don't have to charge them the same rate. So you can charge a little more to non-members, but the cost can't be so prohibitive that it's intended to exclude them from having access. And C is just wrong. That's just like a clear antitrust value violation there. Like I said earlier on, this is not something that I have done much in my practice. So I had to really read all of these, this whole section about antitrust and all that before I took the exam.
I don't feel good in this area at all.
Yeah. And there was a question in terms of which volume of PPAN you were using. Was it the red one or the turquoise one?
Red.
Red, okay. I have turquoise, so the answer is going to be different in turquoise. So I'll look up that afterwards and see if there's a different answer. Yeah, all right. So on to 17. Try to zip through some of these. This is a staffing question. Any HR specialists in the group? I'm gonna start calling on people.
I'll
Abigail?
take it.
Okay,
Oh.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. The best way to allow your association to continually maintain a team of staff that meets the needs of your members is to A, conduct annual performance evaluations with employees and set goals based on the SMART principle. Survey the membership on what the association services are most needed and hire staff based on that need. C, rely on upper level managers who are more in tune to the needs of their supervisees to keep you advised of employee morale. Or D, promote all levels of staff to participate in association-wide training so that all employees are aware of the general workings of the association. I'm gonna say A.
Okay,
The needs of your
correct
members.
correct answer is D.
Yep, that was the other one. Yep.
Promote all levels of staff to participate. And I think the reason for that is that if your employees are just hired for the tasks that they do well, and they're working in the silo and don't know what the association does or some of the programs, they're not providing as much value to the association as if all of your staff know what the programs and the goals are, who your members are, what their needs are.
That makes sense.
18.
I'll take 18 since you called my name before.
Thank you, Abigail.
How can you ensure that staff members understand their job functions, organizational responsibilities, and the chain of and the staff chain of command? And so looking at the answers, And then looking back at the questions, staff members, so to me, that was, they're already on the team, it's internal, they're already working there, so hire only experienced people. I mean, I would assume that they hired experienced people, so I crossed that out. Carefully draft the job advertisement copy. That just didn't seem like it. Yeah, that crossed that out too. Didn't seem like it matched what the question was asking. So C and D, and I chose D because it was specifically speaking about the functions and responsibilities and chain of command. So document and communicate up-to-date job descriptions seemed to be the best answer for the question.
And it's the right answer. Thank you for that analysis. That's very helpful.
And also the employee handbook wouldn't necessarily have job descriptions in it.
Right. Okay, number 19.
I'll do that one.
Thank you.
An applicant's conditional job offer for a receptionist was withdrawn when functional testing revealed she was unable to perform unassisted lifting up to 45 pounds. The ruling in the applicant's discrimination case favored the employer because it was shown that the lifting requirement was a documented essential function of the job. How was the lifting requirement documented? It was listed on the job description. It was discussed during the job offer. It was discussed during the interview. It was expected of all the employees in their department, in that department. I went with A because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And I feel like B and C would be a he said, she said, and I went with A.
And A is the correct answer.
Finally, amen.
And for the reasons you said, if it's discussed and it's not written down, that's not a documentation, which the question asks for documentation. And an expectation, like, well, everybody knows you have to do this, that's not documented either. So that's good. Okay. Number 20. Another HR question.
I'll take that one.
Thank you.
Your association is in the process of conducting an audit of its recruiting and hiring practices. What steps should be taken to avoid employment discrimination claims related to hiring, health maintenance, rehabilitation, and disability? Let's see, consult an attorney, document job offers, identify employee expectations with regard to their positions, write job descriptions that detail the requirements that job workers are expected to perform. Let's see. What step? It's always good to document when you're thinking about any kind of legal action taken against you. So I don't think B is the correct answer because it's not really to do with recruiting and hiring practices. I think that also negates C. So I was between A and D, and I chose D.
Which is the correct answer. And consult an attorney is rarely the correct answer. So D is correct for the reasons you said. It's documenting the expectations of a position so that you can refute a charge of discrimination.
Yes.
So the attorney says consulting attorney is never the right answer. Wait, what?
I mean, on the exam, I didn't mean in real life.
Just on one of these questions, the answer was the attorney, but
I mean,
we'll get
it's,
to that.
yeah, it's rarely the right answer. So if
Right.
you were going to choose that as an answer, think carefully about why the other responses are not appropriate.
Mhm.
Okay. So 21. Another employment question.
I can take this one. This is Christy. Which
Thank
of the
you.
following statements is true regarding employee development? One-on-one training is a more cost-effective way to ensure that common developmental needs are satisfied. To maintain loyalty to their position, employees should only be trained to meet the needs of their current job function. To keep up employee morale, policies should be routinely reviewed to ensure they are generous and apply appropriately to each seniority level of employee. And D is cut off on my screen. Employees' view of their workplace as good and productive one is in large part due to their employer's interest in continued training and development. And can I see the question again? I'm sorry.
There we go.
Employee development. I think I would eliminate A because it says common developmental needs, and that would imply to me a larger group. I think to maintain loyalty doesn't apply with should only be trained to meet the needs of the current job function. I certainly think there's a place for that, but I don't know that it's going to commit to loyalty. I think C I would eliminate because it specifically says generous and apply appropriately to each seniority level. And I think I would go with D, even though I'm not sure that that would apply specifically to employee development approaches, but I think that's the appropriate answer.
And that is the correct answer.
So it's, for me, that takeaway from that is that the employer's interest in continued training and development, right? That, for me, that's what made D, right?
Mhm. Right, so there should be progression. You know, for very small staff associations, it's really hard to have progression throughout the association, but for larger associations, and recall, you're the CSE with no budget and an extremely large staff. So you want to be able to provide opportunities and training for staff to move up through the organization. That's good. Number 22, another employment question. Any takers?
Well, I just love the long questions. Maybe I'll take this one. An existing employee recently promoted to director of education. Wow, weird. Is 6 months into her new role, and you couldn't be more pleased with her performance. You foresee that the employee will do great things, and you want to encourage more ideas. However, you're afraid of putting too much responsibility on her too soon. What can you do to help her on her path to success? Encourage open communication. Suggest she join a local association of peers for networking and sharing of ideas. Oversee each project from inception to completion. Plan for annual review to evaluate performance and workload while establishing future goals. So I think I'm going to go with D, although B seems attractive to me.
And D is the correct answer. It doesn't mean you can't do A and B. C, obviously you wouldn't do because she's not going to grow if you're micromanaging her.
Right.
So D is the correct answer there. Any questions on that one? Okay, 23. Another employment question. Any takers?
I can try. It's Melissa. All of the following statements are true regarding any type of disciplinary action taken against an employee except A, if a drug or substance abuse problem is identified, the supervisor should consider urging the employee to seek professional help. B, if a performance problem is identified, the supervisor should address it with the employee along with concise expectations of a corrected future behavior. C, every step of the disciplinary process should be privately documented by the supervisor and copies should be retained in the employee's file for future action. And D, employers need to carefully consider the reasoning or the reason for terminating an employee if there are any legal ramifications that may come about as a result of termination. So I agreed with B and D. So we were looking for an accept. And so I was struggling between A and C. And I mean, I agreed with A also. And I mean, I agreed with C too. I don't, you know, this one was a hard one for me.
So the correct answer is C.
Okay.
And the
Is it
reason
because of
why,
the employee's file? Is that the word?
yeah, no, it's the word privately.
Privately. Yeah.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
should document
Got it.
performance, you know, when you're doing sort of performance correction or performance review, or if you put somebody on a performance improvement plan, but you shouldn't privately document it and put it like a secret file. The employee should be aware of it. Many organizations require the employee to review it and at least initial that they have received it or sign it. So it's that privately is the one word that made that the wrong answer.
Thank you. I hilariously thought it was employee's file just because I was like, maybe it's a personnel file and they were trying to trick me that way, you know, between the two, but thank you for working me through that.
Okay. All right, number 24. Oh, we're on technology now. Actually, it's a process question. Anybody hasn't done one recently? We only have 36 questions, so we're only 2/3 of the way through with 30 minutes to go. So we're doing pretty good. 20, 24?
I can go.
Thank
I
you.
can go. Identify an appropriate information technology system to achieve your organization's objective is best done by which of the following? A, the board, B, done solely by a consultant, C, the information technology department alone, or D, multiple and varied staff users along with information technology specialist. The one that sticks out the most to me is D because that seems more like a team effort, whereas the others I thought seemed more, B and C especially, I thought it said, because they say solely or alone, I struck B and C, which left A and D, and I chose D.
And thank you. That's the correct answer. And good analysis. Okay, number 25. Another data question.
Just on the past one too, I would say any question that talks about operations and suggests the board is the best one to decide should immediately be ruled out. You do not want your board involved in operations. That's the job of the CSE and his team, his or her team.
Thanks, Terry. That's a good point. Yeah, the board's involved in governance, not operations. 25, data integrity.
I'll take that one. How important is it to maintain data integrity and prevent unauthorized access? Nice, but not a priority, a top organization-wide priority, left up to the membership department, the responsibility of individual members. I think with all of the data laws recently, just coming from Europe and hacking and all that in the US, I went with B. I didn't think it was, of course, the responsibility of the individual members. It would not be maintained. It shouldn't be just the membership department. This is an association-wide priority. So yeah, I went with B.
And that's the correct answer. Sort of a little additional fact, if you are doing any sort of contracts with vendors to have access to your data, you want to make sure that they have the same attention to detail with respect to data integrity and privacy concerns that your association has.
Okay. Thank you.
Number 26. You're a new CSE. Any new CSEs in the group? Want to tackle this one? Before I start calling on people? Catherine?
Oh, I'll go again.
Okay, hey, Don.
All right. You are the new CSE for an established yet stagnant association. God forbid. Your first duty in this new role will be to review existing policies and procedures to ensure compliance and that all critical areas are addressed. Who would be your best resource to aid in this mission? So an attorney, an attorney specializing in association law, an experienced board member who has served the association for many years, an outside consultant with experience in working with association strategic planning, or the association's executive assistant who's responsible for maintaining policies and procedures. So this is one time I would go with the lawyer because they need to review the policies and procedures to ensure compliance. I think that would be the best person to pick out of these options.
And this is the one time the answer is right. Yes. Do association law, association lawyer to do compliance review for the organization. Your board member who has served the association for many years might know the organization, but might not know your federal and state requirements that you need to comply with. The C is not right because it involves strategic planning consultant, and this is not strategic planning, this is compliance. And your association's executive assistant who's got the policies and procedures would be helpful to provide those to the attorney, but again, is not someone who can check for compliance with federal and state laws. Number 27.
Eileen, just back on that last one. Again, even if you didn't know specifically, again, looking at the word compliance is really the key word here, picking apart the question.
Okay, 27.
So I'll do, oh, am I on mute? Okay.
No,
Thought I was still
go ahead.
muted, sorry. I'll do 27. Your organization just completed the development of a new theme along with name, logo, and tagline. What is the most important step you should take to ensure ownership of this intellectual property? So the choices are established rules to use the logo and theme and tagline. Be in all uses of the new logo, theme, and tagline, mark it with the copyright symbol, include the logo, theme, and tagline in your charter and bylaws. C, and then D, obtain a trademark through U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Because they're asking for ownership and of the intellectual property as it pertains to name, logo, and tagline, that is a direct, that's a direct correlation to D, which is obtain a trademark through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and D is the correct answer. I mean, you want to do A as well, establish rules for how you're going to license the use of it and how you're going to use it internally. So A is something, but it's not the most important step, right? And these are the keywords in the question. For B, it's a trademark, so you wouldn't put a copyright symbol on it. So this requires you to know the difference between copyrights and trademarks. C, you would never include your logo, theme, tagline, whatever. Your trademarks are not included in your charter or bylaws because that doesn't give you the flexibility to change them over time without member approval in most cases. So D is the correct answer there. Okay. Number 28, crisis management.
I'll try that one, Ms. Catherine. An effective crisis management plan should address which of the following 4 types of emergencies? A, fire, hurricane, earthquake, and terrorist, financial, legal, occupational, and structural, human resources, facility, structural, and financial, natural element, civil disorder, structural, and utility. I went with D because it seemed to be a little higher level and more inclusive. Like A is fire and earthquake. Those are both natural element items along with the hurricane as well. Anyway, I went with D, the natural element, civil disorder, structural, and utility, because it felt like at a high level, it covered all potential crisis units.
And D is the correct answer for that reason. The other possible answers are all fall under D in terms of the natural elements, civil disorder, structural, and utility.
That's what I was trying to say. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think about having a crisis management plan for like utilities, but a few years ago we had the derecho, and a lot of organizations lost power for like 4 days,
Mhm.
and couldn't work. So interesting to have those thought about in your organization in terms of a crisis management plan. Okay, number 29. Any takers? It's about RFPs. Whitney, do you want to tackle one?
Sure. All of the following should be provided on a request for proposal, except A, budgetary constraints for the project, B, governing documents of the association, C, minimum level of expectation that you have from any prospective supplier, or D, background information about your association, such as your structure, member base, and goals for the project. I chose B for that.
And B is correct. The only reason I can think of a situation where you would include the governing documents in an RFP would be if you were doing a proposal for an attorney or a governance consultant. You might want to provide them in those cases, but for most RFPs, you would not need to provide your governing documents. Okay. Number 30. Any takers for 30? Organizational software in the process.
Another long one you want me to take?
If you're willing.
All right. During a committee report at the Board of Directors meeting, the Legislative Committee identifies a need for organizational software to help further the association's legislative goals. A member of the board states that he has a relative who recently started her own consulting firm. She would be able to contract with the association to develop the software the association needs. What is the best course of action to take during this board meeting? Move to discuss the organizational software issue at the next board meeting. Dismiss the board member's suggestion as a violation of association conflict of interest policy. Assemble a task force to address whether or not the association's legislative agenda is in line with the ability of the association. And D, request that the legislative committee assemble an RFP, which includes the software specifications, and send the RFP to any and all interested parties. Well, so to be fair, it should be D, right? Because you do want everyone to have the ability to bid on this, right? And you also need to come up with what you need. So that's why I picked D.
And D is the correct answer. A just kicks it down to the road to the next board meeting. That does not accomplish anything. B, it's a violation of the conflict of interest policy, but your conflict of interest policy should provide a means by which you handle situations like this by not necessarily excluding the vendor, but excluding the director from participating in discussions. C, the task force to discuss whether the association's legislative agenda is in line with the association's ability. It's like, that's not the question at all. So D is the right answer. Thank you for that one. Okay, number 31. Making good progress, people. 31. Okay, somebody other than Don. Jennifer?
Yes, sorry, I was just making notes on question
Okay.
30. Let's see, 31. You're the new CSE of an association that has a history of setting goals but not achieving those goals. During a strategizing session with key leaders, your best advice to them is setting strategic goals would be to set strategic goals based on the most recent performance evaluation of the CSE. No. Compare your association to other successful associations and choose strategic goals similar to theirs. No. Focus on the steps that should be taken to accomplish the goals to help ensure those goals are met. That's the answer I went with when I got it incorrect, but it is D. Evaluate the mission vision statement of the association and integrate goals into the activities and culture in which the association already takes part. So I think that's the only one that really takes into account the strategizing. So D.
That's the correct answer. So why did you dismiss A and B?
Well, let's see. I don't think the strategic goals should be based on the performance of the CSE, because we're talking about the association and how we can best achieve those goals. And then comparing your association to other successful ones, their goals may not be in line with your association's mission.
Okay, that's good. Good analysis. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, 32. Your board's asked for an analysis. Whitney, do you want to do this one?
Hi, yeah, sorry. Something was blocking the mute button. Okay, 32. The board of directors has asked for an evaluation of the effectiveness of certain association programs and services. In addition to collecting feedback from users of these programs and services, which financial report will you need to conduct your evaluation? A, balance sheet, B, operating budget, C, cash flow statement, or D, statement of activities. What's the question asking again? The effectiveness of certain programs and services. I would say for me, it's between B and D, and I can't remember which. I think it's B, the operating budget. Nope, it's D. I say D as in dog.
D is the correct answer. Yeah, your balance sheet and your operating budget won't tell you much about effectiveness of programs. Your cash flow statement, you might consider that, but D is the correct answer. Again, this is one you just have to know what they mean, the definitions behind these different types of reports, financial reports that you can get and what they're used for. Okay, number 33, another finance question. Any finance people in the group? If not, Abigail, you want to try this one?
Sure. What is required to produce timely and useful financial information? I think this one, I went with the broadest answer and also best practice. So a good bank advisor, no. B, a strong finance committee, no, because we're talking about producing information, not reviewing and analyzing the information. C, accurate and transparent accounting services. And then D, the executive director needs to have an accounting degree. I went with C, which was the broadest and also best practice.
Right, and that's the correct answer for the reasons you've articulated. Thank you. I think it's rare that an executive director would have an accounting degree. That would knock out a whole lot of executive directors in our field if that was required. Okay. Number 34, another evaluating effectiveness question. Anybody not answered one recently? Catherine, you want to take this one?
Sure. After analyzing the effectiveness of current association programs and services, it is revealed that the association might benefit from the introduction of a new membership benefit program. Which document would you prepare to show the board the growth potential of this new program and the information that would be needed to make a decision on whether to proceed? So you have a strategic plan, a business plan, statement of activities, business continuity plan. I went with B, a business plan, because I feel like the strategic, that would be the over encompassing, this is how we're going to do it, document.
And B is correct.
Oh, good.
Business
And I
plan, yeah.
Business continuity would figure into that early on, and it would be part of the overall business continuity.
Yeah, great, good analysis, thank you. Okay, number 35. We might just get through all of them. Yeah. We got 2 questions left. Anyone not done one yet? Or not done 3 or 4 at this point? Jennifer, do you want to do this one?
Sure, I'll take it. Let's see. Your association has gone through the process of developing a business plan by identifying goals and objectives, evaluating data, and preparing the written business plan, including financial projections, break-even points, and total costs for new and existing programs, products, and services. A summary of financials is found at the conclusion of a written business plan. This financial analysis confirms that you have a budget, there's a management team, and the product or service is a strong and good idea. There's a product or there's a market for the product or service, there's a management team, and there's a description of the product or service. The internal resources to produce and maintain the product and services are available. You have a budget, and the product or service is a good idea. D, the product or service is strong and a good idea. There's a market for the product or service and a plan to reach that market, and the internal resources to produce and maintain this product and service are intact and available. So from those choices, I went with D. It was most encompassing and thorough for the financial analysis.
And that's correct. Again, that's one of the things where you read the question, read the answers, and go back and read the question again. And although many of these other items listed in A, B, and C are included in your business plan, this question is asking about the financial analysis and what that confirms. And so D is the correct answer. You're focusing on the strong market and that you can actually make money on this program. Okay. Last question, 36. We've got a disaster on our hands. Who wants to handle that one?
You want me to do it?
If you want to, sure.
Okay.
It's a short one.
Water pipes in your office building burst, flooding most of your headquarters and destroying equipment and files. To cope with this disaster, which resource will you need? Business continuity plan, availability of satellite offices, general liability insurance coverage, offsite storage of critical documents, and computer files. Well, to cope with the disaster, I mean, you need some kind of plan, right? What are you going to do? And you should have done that already. You should have a plan in place. So I'm going to go with A. I mean, yeah, satellite offices would be nice, but you know, that would probably be in your plan, right? If you needed to move to those. Of course, you know, liability, and so it just fits. It's the best fit for me. So that's what.
And that's the right answer, because B, C, and D are subsumed within a business continuity plan. Those are elements of a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah. I'm sorry, I went ahead.
no, I was going to say we've got like 6 minutes left. What do you want to do, Terry?
I was going to ask first, I know some people need to drop off in a couple minutes. Does anybody have any questions for Eileen? Anything, anybody want to go back and review a question? Any general questions? Okay, not hearing any. We do have a few minutes. We can go through scenario questions.
Okay. And if you need to drop off, fine, but it's scenario questions. These are, you will find a few of them on the exam, so it does help to kind of go through them. Let's see who is still here. Catherine, would you like to tackle it?
Okay, I can try. You are conducting your first new director level hiring process. You are determined to make it a participative process to demonstrate leadership to your new staff. All senior staff members screen the applications and interview the top 3 candidates. The senior management team recommends you hire Ms. Smith for the position. You believe her qualifications match the position as it stands, but are not sufficient to take the position to the next level. Which of your following is your best approach in response to the recommendation? Override the recommendation and hire your choice, accept the senior staff recommendation and hire Ms. Smith, have the staff go back to the drawing board, interview other candidates, meet with senior staff, discuss your reservations, and reach a consensus as to whether Ms. Smith is the right candidate. In the interest of time, I would say D, because it seems more inclusive and it would give the senior staff a dialogue between the CSC and the senior staff to make sure if they could work out a final resolution.
And D is the correct answer. For the reasons that you articulated. It includes the senior staff. Since you've involved them in the interview process and they've made a recommendation, this gives you a chance to talk with them just to further test whether or not they do think she's the right candidate, given that she might not have the ability to move forward in the organization. Okay. Number 2.
Can I take number 2? Because I got this wrong and I want to.
Go ahead, sure.
Okay. After the board meeting, several members proceed to the bar located at the hotel next door to the association offices. At the bar, 2 board members engage in detailed conversation about boycotting a vendor. You are sitting at a nearby table with your board chair and other staff members and overhear pieces of the conversation. Which of the following is your best course of action? So I'm going to go to the 2 that I came down to, so C and D. And I chose C because I went back to the board to board, staff to staff, but the answer is D, and I'm not sure why.
And I think you have to make an assumption here that C says you pointed out to the board chair and you say, oh, they're talking about this, and let her handle it. What if she doesn't handle it? And this is something where it's so serious, someone needs to take action. You can't have 2 members talking about boycotting somebody. I mean, that's just a clear antitrust violation. And, you know, if it said, let her handle it and she took care of it, that's great. But, you know, D is the correct answer because you need to stop action. And ideally, your board chair would take care of it because it is board to board, staff to staff. And the second best would be the 2 of you go over together and talk to these people. But if your board chair refuses to act, this is one time when you basically override the board chair's decision not to act, and you do to act. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does now. Because I was just like, I don't understand.
I know, and yeah, they drill in that board to board, staff to staff, but there are occasions when you override that, and this is one of those you would need to do that. Okay.
All right.
Number 3, we got 2 minutes left. Number 3, an employment question. Any HR folks? Any executive directors want to tackle this one?
You want me to do it? I'll do it. Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Don.
A non-exempt employee is consistently late for work, causing frustration among the rest of the staff. You have mentioned it to the immediate supervisor. However, the supervisor's comments to the employee have been ineffective in resolving the situation. Other department staff have complained to the human resources department. The HR director discusses this with you in your weekly meeting. Which of the following is the best way for you to address this situation? A, direct the immediate supervisor to quickly and firmly address the situation. B, let it go. This otherwise good employee gets the work done quickly and efficiently. C, document the employee's record of tardiness in the personnel file. Or D, arrange a meeting with the employee and her supervisor, discuss the situation, setting forth an expectation for change and the consequences of continued tardiness. So totally B doesn't work at all. You may think that way, but that doesn't work. C, document the employee's record of tardiness in the personnel file. Apparently this has been done and now you need to make some kind of action. I mean, the military person in me would want to go with A, but the D is probably the best option here and one I've used myself. So I'm going with D.
And D is the correct answer. It allows you to address the situation. Just documenting it doesn't change anything. And we're looking for the best way to address the situation. So thank you all for your time this morning. We will research answer to number 12 and the background information for that and get that to y'all.
I just want to thank Eileen. That is amazing that she went through that domain and got us done exactly at 10 o'clock. So thank you. I'll go ahead and send the recording afterwards. And also, I want to do that. I will send the recording afterwards, as well as I'll provide Eileen's email address in case you want to follow up with her. You just got through probably the toughest domain. It gets much easier from here. Remember that. So
It does. It does. Good luck
Great work.
everyone with the exam.
Can I ask you guys a quick question?
yes.
You know, as far as passing everything, I mean, are we looking, I mean, I'll just be honest and vulnerable here. I mean, I'm looking at about a 70% rate of ones that I'm getting correct, you know, just on my own without the study group. I mean, where should we be aiming for before we go into the exam? Of course, 100, but like.
It will get better. And there is I mean, if you don't have it, I encourage everybody to buy the study guide.
Yes.
There are questions. Yeah, you got it. So in the back of the book,
Love it.
there are 100 questions. I basically did them over and over and over the week before the exam to make sure that I am sort of improved. Because I was at like 65 when I first did it, and I was like, oh crap, I'm not ready at all. And I literally did it every night. And the night before the exam, I got them all right. And surprisingly, a number of them were actually on the exam.
The
Sorry.
question of what is their pass rate? I mean, I don't know. There's a hard number. I don't know if they do it based on curve or the class each time. It's around 70, I've heard, but
It fluctuates. Yeah.
again, I'd say the big thing is really study up on the areas you feel are not your strong suits, and and also look at the percentage of the test. Because on some of these areas, it might only be like 5% of tests, which means it might be just a handful of questions. So think about where you're going to spend your time. And, you know, obviously the operations, executive leadership strategy are the bigger ones. So definitely put more time towards those, just because they're going to see a lot more of those questions on the exam.
Good advice.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great rest of the week. We will see you next week, and I'll get the video out to you either later today or tomorrow. And thank you again, Eileen.
Yeah, you're welcome all. Bye.
Thanks, Eileen.